there were several outcomes of the age of industrial revolution. But the most important outcome was that of colonization and the age of imperialism. So we see that one of the most important outcomes of the age of machines was that it gave rise to the age of new imperialism. Now, this age of new imperialism was in fact a little different than that of colonization, because primarily colonization had started long back if we look at it. But the age of new imperialism would mean that it was a period of much more colonial expansions by the European powers during the late 19th and the early 20th centuries. Now, Europe had colonies all over the world, and it had started to colonize the world from long back. As you can see here, that all these European powers had their colonies almost all over the world. Now, if we take a look at the colony of Great Britain, we can see that right here in India, Britain has its colony, as well as in some parts of Africa. But this colonization, this age of imperialism, became more aggressive in terms of military acquisition as well. So Europe at the end of 19th century resorted to a more aggressive and extensive form of imperialism. It could be noted that the European countries took over most of the rest of the world between the years 1870 and 1914. So Europe devised, formal political, economic, as well as social control over these new territories that it was gaining. Now, of course, Industrial Revolution had given Europe the power to expand, had given Europe the means to expand because of the rise of the mechanization processes, various products being created. But it is also important for us to realize the fact that, Industrial Revolution also created a need for Europe to move out and colonize more, and not only colonize more, to impose the imperialistic sense of rule over these colonies. So, Industrial Revolution created the need for Europe to expand. Thus, we see that it gave Europe the power to successfully take and profitably maintain many colonies overseas. So, it was important for European powers to, have ample backing that they could ultimately keep the colonies to themselves. Industrial Revolution increased the production capacity of the Western states astronomically. Why? Because of these new inventions of the machinery that was happening at that point of time. We see that there was an enormous hunger for raw materials to satisfy the demands. So at that point of time, there was an amount of demand that was being generated in the market due to the fast growing production procedure. But in order to keep the production procedure, function smoothly, there was a requirement of the raw materials. And it was also important to gain the raw material at the cheapest price possible. So the Western powers sought to the colonies where raw materials were abundant and where they could be appropriated at little to no cost. So we saw that during the new age of imperialism, the European powers are procuring raw materials, but they are not paying for the costs of it. They are not bearing the costs of it because they are just bringing the raw materials from these colonies to their mother countries. So in order to gain these raw materials, it was also important for the European powers to reach these colonies and their markets as well. We see that there are various mechanizations, and in fact the Industrial Revolution itself helped the European powers to come into the inlands of the colonies. Now, the Western powers used their superior weapons and powerful iron warships to conquer much of the world, especially lands in Africa and Asia. And one of the most important of its, transportation or communication tools was the ironclad warships, as you can see from the picture. So the Western powers used their superior weapons and powerful iron dash to conquer much of the world. So was it guns, steamboats, warships, or steamships? It was iron warships. So the steamboats were also used heavily at this point of time. So the armed ships with hulls of iron and steam-powered engines could navigate the non-tidal sections of the rivers, allowing access to the inland. In order to gain and procure materials, raw materials from the colonial markets and to deal with, the colonial subjects, it was important for these colonizers, these European powers, to be able to access the inlands of the colonies. So these steamboats acted as the carriers of the imperialistic, notions of the colonizers as well. We see that the steamboat was therefore an instrument of colonization throughout the 19th century, serving the European powers on their quest of new empires. Now, the colonizers, the European powers, very obviously had their eyes on Africa. Why so? Because Africa had all the resources that was required at that point of time. If you see, the map of Africa, which is that of 1914, you see how Africa has been divided amongst various European powers. So each portion went to one power or the other, looking like it was a scramble for Africa. So everybody was fighting for Africa because of the various resources and the resources in abundance that was there. So Africa, which was rich in oil, ivory, rubber, wood, cotton, cocoa beans, copper, gold, iron, cobalt, diamonds, was very important for the European powers to hold as a colony. In fact, India also became very important because it became one of the most important exporters of luxury goods, which included that of muslin and cotton. So we see that when India is exporting luxury goods like that of muslin and cotton, the European powers can put duties on that export, can put taxes on that export. That becomes a place where they are deriving their revenues from. If you look at the map of India, then you will see that all these territories, that is, for say, marked in pink or marked in, let's say, orange and green and various portions that are even striped, all these are held by either Britain, Portuguese, French. So various European powers are already holding their ground on India, just like Africa, from around 1765 itself. So by the time it was 1890, India had become a major British possession. If you look at this particular map, which is a map of the British conquest of India starting from 1753, where the Britishers have started to come into formally, politically rule India. So it's starting to gain the governing powers over India. So from 1753, it started out from these very small places. So portions of Bengal, portions in the eastern coastal zones. And from there it went to 1858, where it also had all the portions of the northwest frontier province as well as the eastern side, the two extremes of India and the entirety of India. Therefore, we can understand that industrial revolution not only augmented the process of production per se, but it also augmented the process of colonization. It augmented the process of imperialism that brought under the European powers most of the entire world. We see that industrial revolution increased the production capacity drastically. A bigger demand for these products had to be generated. Now, which products are we talking about here? The products that Britain, that various other European countries, which has faced the waves of industrial revolution, they were creating. These products have to be sold. Imagine in a market that has, an augmentation in the process of production, but the demand is on the lower side, but the supply chain is intact. So it has a good supply chain, but the demand is not there as much as it is required to generate a revenue. The European powers wanted to create that demand. And what was the best way to create that demand? The best way to create that demand was to capture the colonial markets, the vast Asian colonial market. So controlling the rest of the world with the help of imperialism gave the option to suppress their capability, gave the option to suppress the capability of the colonial subjects producing goods, and created a market outlet for their own products, for the products of the Europeans. Thus, we see that the colonies of the Western powers have a ready-made market for their goods. Why? Because these are already established markets that the Europeans can inject their goods in. In fact, Asia's textile markets were very, very vast at that point of time. Now, if we particularly look at a country like India, which had a very vast population, automatically new products will get accepted sooner in the market. So India was the most important customer for the British manufacturers as well. But in order for these European powers to, inject their own products into the markets, it was necessary to clear the markets of the indigenous products that were being produced. So what happened with the colonial markets and the colonial goods? Well, the colonial markets had to go through a man-made de-industrialization. So the indigenous industries had to suffer for the European industries to prosper at this point of time. We see that specifically if we take the example of India, India had to go through a phase of de-industrialization where all indigenous markets of India were destroyed, and the craftsmen, the artisans who were included in these industries, who got an employment out of it, everybody almost went into grappling poverty at this point of time. So industrial revolution created a great impact on the world, where the world was taken to modernity through the various mechanizations that came up at this point of time. But it is also important to note that the impact of industrial revolution was also felt in terms of society, politics, as well as economy, where the new age of imperialism looks like a direct outcome of the industrial revolution. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly, learn via games, and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it is rewarding too. So register for free now.